There we go. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Today is day 9, and we are tapping into another of the power skills. And today we're going to be talking about communication. We're going to be talking about how all of these that we've already discussed, and there are a lot more of these power skills, but we're going to be talking about how the ones that we've discussed thus far and how others interact together. And we're going to be talking about the brain science behind all of it. So I am super excited to be wrapping up today with you. Quick reminder, if you have not yet signed up, go to the link that's on the screen. And if you don't see it on the screen, feel free to post in the comments or send a direct message on whichever platform it is that you're watching. I want to make sure that you guys have ongoing access to these recordings because they are coming down tomorrow, Wednesday. And in addition to the recordings, you will also get some bonuses. And those who have already signed up have already gotten access to the bonuses that exist already. And there's more that's being added. So make sure that you get signed up. All right, let's jump right into communication. You know, there's a quote by George Bernard Shaw that says, the single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place. I want to repeat that. The single biggest problem with communication is the illusion it has taken place. As we get more into this today, you'll better understand exactly what I mean and what George Bernard Shaw meant when he said this. The thing with communication is it hasn't happened until both the sender and the receiver have the same message. And sometimes there is a huge gap. How many of you have, just say yes in the chat, how many of you have ever thought that you were perfectly clear with someone, you gave information or you asked a question, and the response you got back was 180 degrees from what you were expecting because there was a huge gap between what you had said or what you had asked and what the other person heard and received? I know I've been there, and we're going to get into why some of that happens and how we can overcome that. But in the meantime, think about this. I've been talking about how many businesses, corporations, etc., are now hiring based on these skills versus technical skills. Used to, businesses, they hired for technical skills, and then sometimes they would train on these what are now called power skills. Often, well, historically, these were referred to as soft skills. So, I mean, like, who wants to take the time to teach soft skills, right? What they have found, what studies have shown, is that these skills are actually what separates a person from success and being unsuccessful. So 85% of communication is of success is in being able to successfully deal with people. Only 15% of success is based on technical skills. So Brian Tracy said this forever ago. If you're familiar with Brian Tracy, he's been around for a long, long time. He's one of the godfathers of leadership and getting things done and processes. And he's written lots of books, and he's been, an international speaker for years and years and years. And he was talking about this years ago. In fact, that's his statistic. 15% of success is based on technical skills, and 85% is based on your ability to deal with people, which is communications and all of these other skills that we've been talking about. Now, like I said, corporations are beginning to recognize it. In fact, they're no longer even calling them soft skills. They're calling them power skills. And that's why this series has been called the Power Skills Pop-Up Series. So who am I? What do I do? How do I know anything about this? I am Angela W. Stillwell. I'm the founder and CEO of Untapped Strengths, and I work with individuals to transform them into incredible leaders, and I work with teams to transform them into powerhouses. So I've been working with corporations and individuals, coaching and consulting and doing training and speaking, for, I don't know, years. I feel like I've been doing it since I was a little kid. And if you go back and you look at some of the things that I have done my entire life, it absolutely has gotten me to this place. So I've taught this. I coach on it. My clients have benefited from my personal experiences, and my personal experiences are what got me to dive even deeper into all of this. I think I mentioned the other day about going through my divorce and deciding I needed to figure out what I did right and wrong in my marriage. And my marriage was a 22-year marriage. So it wasn't like it was a short marriage. But what did I do wrong? What did I get to change so that going forward, I wasn't finding myself in that same place? Now, I had been successful in business. I had built businesses. I had put together a consortium of independent telephone companies. I had had a financial planning practice. I've done a lot of things over the years, and I'd been successful in every single one of those. And then I failed at my marriage. I consider it failing because it ended, right? It's not a failure as long as there's not an ending. Well, that ended. That was a failure on my part. I can't control anything that he did or did not do. I can only control what I did or didn't do. And so I started diving into what were the things that I wanted to shift going forward. What did I want to improve about myself? And it came down to my leadership skills, my personal leadership skills. It came down to soft skills. It came down to building connections and building relationships and having better communication, because the way that I grew up, I didn't understand those things. I mentioned the other day, if you've seen, I moved over 60 times. I went to 13 different schools. So I didn't inherently develop these skills that many children do. A lot of children don't, but many children do, just because of the way that, they're in class and they're doing a lot of different things and building friendships. And I did not do that as a kid. I had friends, and I did not have long lasting friends because I knew I wasn't going to be there very long. And so what that ended up doing was impacting my ability to relate to my now ex-husband. It impacted my ability to have conversations, have those difficult conversations like what we were talking about the other day. If something didn't feel right to me, I didn't know how to express myself. And so I went down this rabbit hole of learning all about leadership. What does it look like? Taking 100% responsibility 100% of the time. What does that look like? Being accountable, being able to communicate, being able to speak my needs, being able to understand my style, my personality versus someone else's personality. And then as I started doing that, I was like, holy cow, the clients that I'm working with could greatly benefit from this. And so I started rolling it out with clients. In fact, I have a program called Vulnerability Warrior that was great. I don't do that exact program any longer. The people who went through that program, it was amazing to see the changes that they were able to gain in that program. That was the first time that I rolled out some of these ideas to my clients. And now I've spoken on stages and have one-on-one clients and group coaching clients, and I work with corporations in, training their teams. And so yeah, I know a little bit about it. And I've studied the brain science behind it. And we're going to dig into the brain science behind all of this and how it all interconnects in just a little bit. So there are some issues when it comes to communications. Oftentimes, it comes down to 4 problem areas when there is a disconnect. Those 4 problem areas are the need to be right, the need to be in control, the need to look good, and the need to stay safe. And I can tell you that as a kid, the way that I grew up, I fell into every single one of those. I wanted to be right. I wanted to be in control because my life was so out of control. I wanted to look good because I was always the new kid, and new kids get picked on, right? And I needed to feel like I was safe because I was moving in the middle of the night. There were all sorts of things that were going on. And so I was constantly hitting up against those roadblocks in communication. One of the first things that when you're building this communication muscle, one of the first pieces of it that can be one of the most difficult to learn is active listening. With active listening, we are listening to actually understand, to have empathy, and to build rapport. When we are not using active listening, we are listening to respond. And I still catch myself doing it, right? There are times when I'm excited about something and somebody's talking and I just want to get the next piece out, right? I just want to say what's on my mind and I'm not really hearing what they're saying. Ever been there? Put in the chat if you've ever been there. I know I still find myself doing this sometimes, and then I have to reel myself back and go, whoa, wait a minute. You're not really listening. I'm not really listening. And I haven't heard anything that they have said, or I've only heard what I wanted to hear, right? So this active listening piece, and when I do this in a classroom, I actually take them through an exercise to see what they hear. And it becomes pretty interesting because the vast majority of people in a room are not active listening. They are listening based on some belief, some meaning that they have already given it. And that gets into the brain science. Again, we'll touch on that in a minute. Now, the other thing that impacts your communication skills is the ability to style flex with the person you're communicating or the people you're communicating. So if and I've talked about this a few times over the last 9 days, if I am from a DISC assessment standpoint, how many of you have done DISC? I mean, you can put it in the chat if you've done DISC or whatever personality assessment. Maybe you've done Myers-Briggs, put that in the chat. If you've done DISC, if you've done Myers-Briggs, if you've done Strengths Finders, if you've done Colby is cognitive versus cognitive. The others are all cognitive. I've done all of them because remember, I go deep on this stuff. But understanding your style and being able to recognize someone else's style is super important. I am a very high D. I am as high D as one can get on the chart in my natural way of being, which means that I'm bottom line oriented. I come out and I am just like boom, 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 boom. And I am bottom line, bullet points, and just blurt it out and walk away thinking I told them what I needed and that was that, right? Well, if I am dealing with someone who is a high S that way, they are going to see me as aggressive. Now, if a high S comes and speaks to me the way that a high S is comfortable speaking, I'm going to see them as passive. And what we want to do is meet in the middle at assertive. And assertive looks different in every different situation. One of the scenarios that I love to talk about that I use in training rooms is a special forces team. When a special forces team is out in the field and they are doing what special forces teams do, are they being aggressive or are they being assertive? If they are out knocking down doors and clearing buildings, are they being aggressive or are they being assertive? It's going to depend, obviously, because there are times when they have been aggressive, but they're being assertive because that is the role that they're playing in that moment. If they start being aggressive, they end up in the headlines. And we've seen some of that, right? We've seen where there have been teams that have ended up in the headlines. Right, wrong, or indifferent, they've ended up in the headlines. And that's when they looked aggressive to other people. When they're not in the headlines, they're just being assertive. Right? So it can look different, whether it's in an office environment, a home environment. Maybe you are a person who is a high I and you're boisterous and you love people, and you have a child who is a high C. They want to know all of the rules. They want to know all of the guidelines, and they're checking every box. Everything has to be just perfect before they can take their next step, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And as a high I, that's going to drive you crazy. By the way, it drives me crazy too. So when when you're dealing with different personalities, you get to style flex so that you end up in that place of assertiveness rather than aggressive or passive. Okay. Super important. The other thing to think about is being precise and being concise. Precise means picking the right words, using the right tone, etc., to make sure that you can get your message across. And being concise is using the fewest words possible so that there is no loss of translation, right? So that nothing gets lost in the translation between the sender and the receiver. Remember, sender and receiver get to have the same message in order to have good communication. Okay. So when you are having when you're communicating with people, a lot of you have heard the statistics of, or the percentages of, which piece is verbal, which piece is physical, which piece is tone, etc. Only 7% of communication is verbal as it's received. Okay. So the receiver is only getting 7% of the message by the words you're using. 38% is from the tone that you are using. That think again about my example of coming in as a high D and talking with a high S. I come in, my voice is probably loud to them, and I am short and to the point. And so from their perspective, my tone is aggressive. Okay. Visual is 55%. What are you doing from a visual standpoint? Now, there's a lot of studies on that. Your body language says a lot of things. There's a lot of tell signs, of what's happening with the body, minor ticks in facial muscles and other things that people do. If you've studied anything in gambling, there's always a tell sign, of people at, sitting around the table playing cards. It's why people often wear glasses and that sort of thing so that they don't readily show their tell signs, right? So 7% verbal, 38% the tone, and 55% is visual. Now, arms crossed, sometimes that looks like someone is off-putting if they're leaning back versus leaning forward, right? There's a lot of different things. So think about that when you are in the middle of communications with someone. Now, communication in today's environment is a little more difficult than it has been in the past. And a big piece of that is because how many of you have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs? It's something that I learned about, I don't know, probably in high school originally, and then dug more into it in undergrad, and then definitely dealt more with it when I was working on my master's degree. Had a whole course that was built around that concept. And the most basic need on Maslow's hierarchy of needs is the physical needs. This is shelter. This is food, sleep, right? The next level is safety and security. So if people aren't feeling safe, they're not going to be able to get to those next, higher rungs. Again, if they're not getting their physical needs met, they can't get up to safety and security. If they're not getting safety and security met, they can't get up to the level of feeling loved and belonging. Okay. Love and belonging is that third level up. And then the next level up is self-esteem. And then the next level up is self-actualization. That is the top of the pyramid. And everyone gets to strive for that self-actualization, that point at the pinnacle. And when things are going great around the world, when the economy is booming, when businesses have full employment, when people are happy at home, then it is much easier to get to that higher pinnacle or those higher levels. In today's environment, there are people who are losing their jobs, can't put food on the table. they don't feel safe and they don't feel secure. So where are they on the hierarchy? They are down at the bottom. They're down on those bottom two pieces of those bottom two layers of the pyramid. And when that's happening, people are in a defensive mode. They are looking out for themselves. And so making sure that you can get your message across to them is going to look a lot different than when they are in a place of feeling secure and happy and fulfilled. Okay. Then when you think about that, and I spoke the other day about that, the level of trust around the world, studies are showing that the level of trust is the lowest it has ever been. We don't trust our neighbors. We don't trust people of other ethnicities. We don't trust our bosses. We don't trust our priests. We don't trust, right? On and on and on and on and on. There's a lot of, we don't trust politicians. We don't trust. And so this cycle of mistrust is something that when you are trying to communicate with someone, you get to be aware of. The first thing is someone is, oftentimes when there's a cycle of mistrust going on, people assume the negative. And from a brain science standpoint, your brain, your subconscious brain repeats the negative 9 times to 1 time of being repeated of the positive. 9 to 1. That's why our negative thoughts greatly outweigh our positive thoughts, unless you are consciously doing something to change that ratio. Okay. So they assume the negative, which then causes them to protect themselves. Okay. And then they observe aggressive behavior, which then causes more negative assumptions, which then causes more self-protection than observing aggressive behavior. So it's this vicious cycle of mistrust going on and on and on, versus when there is trust built. And there's a lot of ways to build trust. We'll talk about some of those in a minute. But when there's a cycle of trust, it starts with openness, which leads to transparency, which leads to diversity of thought, diversity of ideas, et cetera, which then leads to openness. And so you have the cycle of trust, openness, transparency, diversity, which leads to openness, transparency, diversity, which leads to, right? So when there is trust, going back to the brain science piece, when there is actual trust, your body produces oxytocin, which is a fantastic neurochemical. So when your brain is producing oxytocin, you feel good, you're more positive about things, you let things slide that normally wouldn't slide. And so what happens in that environment, there is more engagement, performance goes up, there's more innovation, people relate to each other better, well-being of everyone is at a higher level. So when you have that cycle of trust going, it's not just the negative neurochemicals that are fought off. You also build all of the positive neurochemicals. And so it's not just an external process, it's an internal process as well. So when you think about building trust in communications, there's the idea where building responsibility, building accountability, having an understanding of the various styles of people that you're communicating with, whether it's your spouse or your children or your workmates or your teammates or your boss or whomever it is, right? So you get to really study the different personality styles. Now, the brain science piece, I've touched on it a little bit throughout the whole 9 days, and I've touched on it a little bit more today than I have in the past. But I want you to understand how important the brain science piece is to all of this. Your communications are impacted by what's happening in your subconscious brain, the meanings that you're giving to things, the perspective that you have about things, the beliefs that you have about things. And if you have never taken the time to really listen in to what you are saying to yourself about various situations. Now is the time, because in order to level up, you get to get intimately familiar with what's happening in your subconscious brain. It's the only way to change the cycles that you're in. So getting familiar with that, because remember, your subconscious thoughts and beliefs drive 80 to 90+% of every decision you make, every action you take, and every result you get. It happens because the subconscious brain is trying to be as effective as possible, and it automates certain thoughts that have been repeated over time. And so then it just happens. It just happens. You don't think about how you have to brush your teeth, right? You don't think about how you breathe. You don't think about, you know, how many of you have ever been driving and you don't even remember how you got to where you were, because it's just so automated. It's a place you go to regularly, and you're just, it's muscle memory, right? Your brain is a muscle too. And your brain writes neural pathways that impact everything that you do. You have an opportunity to choose. Do you keep those same thoughts and beliefs, or do you want to replace them with something that is more true today for you? That was the process that I went through when I started thinking about what had negatively impacted me when I was going through my divorce, right? So I got to dig in and think, okay, what are my thoughts around relationships? What are my thoughts around what love looks like? What are my thoughts around what trust looks like? What are my thoughts around what communication looks like? What are my thoughts around difficult conversations? What are my thoughts around, you get the picture, right? And so every time I would get to a different layer, there was another layer and another layer and another layer, right? And I got to say, yes, I want to keep that. No, I don't want to keep that. And then there's a process that you go through when you don't want to keep something as your truth. If it's no longer your truth, it's just that you've been operating on that because it's in your subconscious brain, right? Then there's a process you go through. Okay. So when you are thinking about how all of these things stack on top of each other that we've been talking about over the last 9 days, emotional intelligence, adaptability, resiliency, having difficult conversations, critical thinking, leadership, connection and relationship building, and communication, like today, your thoughts and beliefs, your subconscious brain is impacting every single area that we've talked about thus far, and the others that we haven't discussed around soft skills, power skills. Okay. Your brain is driving that. And my encouragement for you, my challenge for you is, and I've said this several times over the last 9 days, get intimate with what those thoughts are. What comes up when some of these concepts are brought up to you? What is the thought that you have? As you dive deeper into thinking about your vision and building out your goals, what are you saying to yourself? If you say, I want to make $1 million within 3 years, what does your brain say? If your brain is saying, that is impossible, look at where you are right now, then guess what? You're not going to get to that dollar amount because you will self-sabotage. Okay. If your goal is to get to a higher level within the organization that you are, and you keep repeating that you are not in a place, or you don't have the skills, or you don't have XYZ in order to get to that level, then guess what? You're not going to get there. If you're unemployed right now and you keep repeating over and over and over how difficult it is to find a job, and I'm not negating that it is difficult right now. That's reality. However, as long as that is your driving thought, remember, negative thoughts are repeated 9 times more than a positive thought. So your subconscious brain goes, oh, look at that. You're repeating that again. You're repeating that again. So we're just going to automate that. And then what happens from an energetic standpoint, this is not woo-woo, this is actual science. They've shown brain science about this. So when you are operating from that place gets fulfilled. You may get a level up, and then what happens is you hit a ceiling and you fall back down. You guys, I used to do this all the time, because I had these beliefs that were impacting me. I still have beliefs that impact me. And when I realize that I have them, I start peeling back the layers to find out, what do I get to shift? And that's what I do with my clients. So you guys, communication, there is a lot to it. All of these skills work together. Think about how communication impacts emotional intelligence, and how emotional intelligence impacts communication, and how adaptability and resiliency impact having difficult conversations. All of these work together. So you don't get to pick just one. You get to work on all of them. Now, you can practice one at a time and know that over time, you're going to improve all of your skills. The first stage is getting very intimate with your own thoughts. Now, I have talked several times, I've mentioned several times about, if you want to book a call, feel free to put it in the comments and or send me a DM on whichever platform you're watching. And let me know that you'd like to book a call. It's a 30-minute call. We'll talk about where you are, what you're bumping up against, and where you're wanting to go. And then we'll figure out what your best next step is. There's no obligation. It's a call. I want to be able to help you. This is just something that I want to do for you, my audience, and help you, because I know that there is so much that is happening in the world right now that is impacting every single one of us, right? It's impacting you. It's impacting me. It's impacting everyone. And until you have the skills to help you get beyond what's happening on a subconscious level, you may find yourself continuing to spiral. And I don't want that for you. I don't think you want that for you either. Meanwhile, send a message, put it in the chat, whatever, and we will follow up by sending you a link to book a call. And quick reminder, if you have not signed up with the link that should be on the screen, it is bit.ly/power skills pop-up. And each of those words, the first letter is capitalized, power skills pop-up. Each word, the first letter is capitalized. So bit.ly/power skills pop-up. Get signed up, because I have set up all of the recordings online, and you'll be able to download the MP3s, the audio, so you can listen to it on the go. So the videos are there, the MP3s are there, and there are also other bonuses for the people who have signed up. So hopefully, if you haven't done that yet, you get that done. Get that done today. Like I said, the recordings are coming down tomorrow. So I want to make sure that you have ongoing access to what we've been discussing over this last 9 days. I want to thank every single one of you who have been a part of this, whether you've been able to watch live or you've watched the replays. You guys are an integral part of my life, and I just adore each and every one of you for being a part of this journey. And I want to thank you for taking the time to look at these skills and how they can positively impact you and your life and your goals and dreams. You can use them in your personal life. You can use them in your professional life. And my challenge for you is to pick one, start going after it, and also to think about, what are the thoughts that are coming up for you around your goals and visions? Okay. Do you still want to keep that? Do you still want to keep those beliefs? All right, you guys. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It has been such a pleasure being with you over this last 9 days. I will be starting a weekly live show. The first episode of that will be tomorrow at this same time. And that will be a weekly show. It won't be daily any longer. It's just going to be weekly. So I look forward to seeing you on the weekly show tomorrow. And thank you for being a part of the Power Skills pop-up series. Have a fantastic week.